What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Patrick here. Moving on to the next example in the midterm review. So we're asked here, which of the following equations represent y as a function of x? So we have these three equations here. So basically, which of these are going to be functions? So let's start off with this first one, part A, 3x plus 5y minus 9 is equal to 0. Well, whenever you have an equation with x and y to the power of 1, right? And it's not like a rational equation or anything like that. If you ever have something like that, you know you're dealing with a line, right? We could basically take this and isolate for the y. So if we were to do that, bring the negative 9 over, the 3x over, so we would have 5y equals negative 3x plus 9, and divide everything by 5, we would have y equals negative 3 over 5x plus 9 over 5, right? So that's a little bit more obvious to see that you're basically dealing with a line y equals mx plus b, right? It has a negative slope. Basically, I mean, we're not going to go into too many details here. Y-intercept 9 over 5, and it's a negative slope going down like this, right? So a line is always a function in terms of x unless it's a vertical line. In this case, it's just a regular line with a negative slope, right? It's passing that vertical line test. All right, so part A, that one is a function in terms of x. Now, what about part B? Now, with part B, we have 4 plus y squared is equal to x. Now, whenever you see a y squared around, so notice we see that in part C as well, pretty much all the time then, it's not going to be a function of x. Because what it's going to mean is that we're basically able to have multiple y values for a single value of x. Because, okay, if we have, for example, if we plug in, let's say we plug in for part B a y value of -1 and a y value of +1. Notice that when we plug in both of these, we would have -1 squared, which is +1 plus 4 gives us an x value of 5. Same thing here, an x value of 5. And so what that means graphically is basically at that x value of 5, we have two y values. Let's not put a dot there, right? So at that x value of 5, we have a y value of -1, and we have a y value of +1. And so it's going to be failing that vertical line test, right? There's multiple points for that single x value, and so that can't happen if we're going to have y as a function of x, right? It has to pass the vertical line test. There can only be a single point for every x value on the relation, right? So this part B here, it's not a function. Okay, and if you're wondering how part B looks like, it's basically just a sideways parabola. Like if you were to take this and graph it in Desmos, that starts at 4 and basically goes to the side like that, right? And so I just plugged in that 5 to get that y value of +1 and -1, but there's a bunch you could plug in. You could pretty much plug in any y value here, right? Plus and minus of that y value, and you would get that same x value. So basically on this sideways parabola, you are always failing the vertical line test. And then moving on to part C, again, we have this y squared, as I mentioned, which pretty much tells you it's not going to be a function. Whenever you have y to the power of an even exponent, so whether 2, 4, there's usually going to be multiple y values for a single x value. So it's not necessarily true if it's y to the power of an odd exponent, right? We had y to the power of 1 here, or if we had like y to the power of 3, for example, then not necessarily you can't just come to the conclusion that it's not going to be a function. There's like further work required, but in this case, whenever you have an even exponent, pretty much always it's not going to be a function of x. And this is basically going to be an ellipse, right? So if you were to graph this, best thing to do is to get the y and x intercepts. So if I get the x intercepts, plugging in 0 for y, I'd have what? 3x squared equals 42. So that means x squared would be, what would that be? That would be 14, right? So x is going to be plus or minus root 14. So we're going to have positive root 14 negative root 14, right? The x-intercepts, and then the y-intercepts, plug in 0 for x, we would have 7y squared is equal to 42. So then y would be plus or minus root 6, right? Which would be like positive root 6, negative root 6. Again, you don't necessarily have to know this, how it looks like, but in case you're wondering, this is pretty much how it would look like, right? So it's basically failing that vertical line test at many x values. There's multiple y values for single x values. That can't happen, right? So this here is not a function, right? So the only one that was a function was the first one, which was just a regular line. And that's a wrap for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you want to see more videos like this, please go to my website, allthingsmathematics.com. Over there, all of the videos are organized by chapter, by section. If you feel like you need tutoring at any point, you could also hit me up. My contact details are on the website. Enjoy your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.